Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. It has been a minute since I have made a video. Um, I went to a LARP event, as I talked about a little bit before, and then it took me a little while to catch up with work from that, and then I got, then I got sick, which led to my MS having a flare-up, and this is the first week that I've been fully somewhat back to normal. So I'm just going to be making a quick video today talking about going to my first LARP event knowing that I have MS and how knowing that has kind of changed my perspective on a few things and changed how I plan on doing LARP events in the future. So if that's something you're interested in, please stay tuned. And as always, I am going to be doing my makeup while I talk about this, and I will show you all of the products and explain anything about them that might be relevant as I go in case any of them kind of catch your eye. Of bronzer, I have the Physicians Formula one that I have been working through for what feels like about a year now. There is just so much product in here, and as you can see, I have barely put a dent in it. And I'm just going to be contouring my cheeks and under my chin with this. So to start with, I want to talk a little bit about the particular LARP my husband and I do. We started off in one called Dagger here and have pivoted more to be doing one called Belagarth due to reasons that are kind of above what I've followed along with in the past. Essentially, or event leaders, organizers, things like that. But point is, we do one called Belagarth. Now for me, Belagarth has always been more of a sport than a LARP. There's not really a huge roleplay element to it. The main thing we do is we just kind of go hang out with friends and fight. Fight being the big one. Now, unlike a lot of LARPs that you imagine when you think of the term, Belagarth is a full contact sport. So for a blow to count, there has to be something called sufficient force. Exactly what that means, I am not necessarily the best person to ask, but the point is you shouldn't count a blow if you don't really, if it doesn't feel solid. As for my blush, my current blush is still broken. I do have a new one that I'm going to be showing you guys sometime in the future, but for my reviews, I do like to have used a product for a little while, and I haven't used it quite enough to be ready to show it on here yet. So I am just going to be using the My Little Pony collection from Beauty Creations, the blush in there, as it is currently the only one I have. So with the majority of what we do there being fighting, that has not been something I've really been able to participate in for honestly the entire time I've done it, but especially the past year and a half or so, it has just really been hitting me. I'm also going to be using the highlighter out of this palette as well. Because the fighting aspect of it has actually always been something that was really important to me. In fact, at my first event, I wasn't sure if I was going to fight at all, but my husband knows exactly how to rile me up, and he made a joke about it probably being for the best because I was too delicate. So needless to say, I was on the field within 5-10 minutes of us getting there. And I had a great time, I loved it, and I fell in love with the combat side of this sport. And so to not be able to partake in that has been a huge thing that's been bothering me, because we've never known exactly why, only that I haven't really had the energy lately and I haven't been able to go out and do what I usually would at these events. Moving on to my eyes, I'm going to be priming with the NYX primer in white as usual. And then for my eyeshadow, I am using the Mint to Be palette, which you may remember from my review a little while ago. And I'm going to be using the colors Dementh, Ice Cold, and Freshman today. So obviously with me not being able to fight and really partake in the way that I had before, but thinking that it was just temporary, that it was just an injury or an illness, and you know, I always kept telling myself, next event I'll be back to normal, so there's no point in, you know, thinking really about what this would mean going forward for me. And so I would just spend the majority of these events just kind of sitting beside the field, watching everybody else fight, which you know, wasn't great for mental health. I would definitely get down on myself quite a lot about not being on the field with them, about not being able to participate, and just kind of feeling like there really wasn't a place for me at these events. And I want to start by saying this was objectively kind of silly on my part. We have other people in company that don't fight. There's a lot of people that go to these events who don't fight. There are plenty of other things to do, but I was so stuck on fighting that I'd never really considered going out and looking at all of those. And now I'm going to start on the eyeshadow. So I'm going to be doing Freshman on the outer corner to start with. And I'm going to be just using my finger for that because I feel like it works better with kind of shimmery shadows. But anyways, so obviously armed with my diagnosis, I knew something was kind of going to have to change a little bit, that the way that I'd been doing things just wasn't sustainable, that I'd needed to do something different this event. And so on the drive up, I got my diagnosis very close to when we ended up going to the event. And I'd still kind of been coping with it at that point. I'd still kind of been adjusting. And so I told my husband, I said, at this event, I am here as strictly non-combat. I'm not allowed to fight, and for all future events, I'm just going to consider myself non-combat. Maybe there will be events that I feel up to fighting, but I don't want to go into events with the expectation that I am here to fight anymore. It has just been causing me more stress and making it harder for me to have a good time. I'm next going to be taking ice cold and doing that kind of outside of the inner corner of my eye and probably going under a little bit. So I told my husband that I am officially non-combat, and he was very supportive of this decision. He helped me, suggest some activities to do at the event instead when I wasn't fighting. And this entire event, I also gave myself the rule of I was not allowed to spend more than 10, 15 minutes sitting beside the fighting field a day. I wasn't allowed to just kind of camp out there and watch everybody else the way that I'd kind of been doing. I clearly wasn't having fun like this. I wasn't gaining anything from it, and my event experience was just kind of not great because I was so focused on what everybody else was doing. So I decided in the car ride that I was going to participate in something called the Arts and Sciences, or A&S competition. I think the thing I entered technically might have been a slight rules violation because while I didn't finish it until the morning that I submitted it because I was hand sewing on a trim, I think I technically started it like a month or two before when you were supposed to for the submission guidelines, but I've got to be honest, I didn't, it was my first time doing something like that, and I didn't know that the submission guidelines were on Facebook, and when I was up there, nobody mentioned when I was supposed to have started something by. I didn't win anyways, so it doesn't matter, but I'm kind of glad it didn't win, because I would feel kind of bad if I accidentally violated a rule a little bit there. Next, I'm just going to be taking Dementh, and I'm going to be using that to kind of blend a little bit in the upper eye region and in the inner corner. So I had, at that point, done A&S, I did the Bardic competition, and generally just kind of hung out meeting people. I took some classes, and I started finding all of these other ways to be involved. And the second I started doing that and stopped focusing on the fact that I wasn't fighting, I started having a great time. Shocker. And so I've kind of decided that, in the future, even though I might have events where I can fight, I'm going to consider myself non-combat. To finish it off, I feel like the inner eyes corners could use a little bit of brightening, so I'm just going to hit Mojito My Hammy and put that right in the inner corners. Alright, sorry about that. My recording object ran out of recording space, so I hope I didn't lose too much footage there. But I just did some basic eyeliner and some mascara. If it looks a little janky, the eyeliner mite today because it has been a not great hand day, especially this eye. I did this eye first and it looks okay, and that made me feel confident, and this eye did not go so well. Such is the way of things with MS sometimes. But to get back to what I was saying, this was the first event where I was there as a non-com, or non-combat. I know that some people in the community are kind of trying to move away from using that term because they feel like it focuses on what they can't bring to the table rather than what they do. But for me, it feels like a very freeing term to use, so I will continue to use it for myself, and I do rather prefer that being used for me than some of the other labels that I've seen people kind of come up with to use instead. Nothing wrong with them. Everyone should be able to label what they come to the event and what that experience is for them however they see fit. But for me, non-com just feels the most accurate. My camera's a little crooked. There we go. So for me, it felt very freeing to no longer feel like combat was the focus of the event. And I feel like that's kind of what non-com is saying, is it's saying that you're not there to focus on the combat. You're not a combatant. And again, I understand why some people wouldn't like that phrasing, but for me, it just feels good. It feels freeing. It feels like it's saying that I don't have to fight rather than that I can't fight, even though often the reason that I'm not fighting is because I can't. And it's not to say that I'm never going to go back on the field. If I have an event where I'm feeling pretty good and I'm on good medication and I'm well managed, I might go out and fight for a little bit, but I'm no longer using that as like the centerpiece of my event. I plan on helping out on the field in other ways. I'm planning on volunteering in something called Weapons Check at the next event I go to, which is where you just make sure all of the weapons and hitting implements and shields people have brought with them to the event are safe and aren't going to cause any injuries. I'm going to be vending, hopefully, at an event coming up in April. So I also might do some vlogs just kind of showing the process of getting ready for that, because as you can imagine, a lot goes into vending. But it has been, again, I can understand why somebody wouldn't like the term non-combat. I'm not saying that other people have to use it, but I do feel like in some instances it can be freeing to use, and that we shouldn't act like using it is like a bad thing, I guess. I don't know. I hope that makes sense. This is kind of getting a little bit rambly. But yes, so it has been nice kind of removing those expectations from myself, and I hope anybody else in a similar situation can kind of take something from this. So I've already started planning for the next event we're going to. That's the other thing that was really different about this event. In the past, by the last day of the event when we've left, I'm always having fun, but I was always ready to go home by the end. I was always tired, worn out, and just ready to like take a shower and go to bed. This was also the first event where when the last day came, I kind of felt like, oh, that's it? But I could go for another week. I could do this for another week. I'm having a great time. But obviously, that's not how these things work, and we did have to leave at the end of the week, sadly. But I was already planning what I was going to do for the next event in the car. I can remember driving home and just talking my husband's ear off about potential songs for the next Bardic competition, pieces I might make for the next A&S competition. And that's not something I'd really ever done before. I also have a few other ideas that I can't really get into in case anybody from company watches my channel, just because I do want them to be a bit of a surprise for certain people. But this was the first event I left planning for the next one and ready to do more, not tired and ready to take a nap. I mean, don't get me wrong, I also was very tired, but I didn't fall asleep in the car this time, which is unusual for me. I stayed up and kept my husband company for the whole 6-hour drive home. Whether or not he appreciated hearing me talk the whole time, I don't know, but he did get to. But that's about all I have to say on that. So I'm going to try and post again next week. When I do, as you know, it's going to be the review of either the Miss Bliss palettes or the Going Cocoa Nuts palette. If you have a preference, please let me know in the comments. If you don't, I will be doing Miss Bliss, because this is the palette I've been using the longest out of the two of them. I do keep putting them back in the box just so that I remember that I haven't reviewed them yet. But when I post my reviews, please know I have been using that palette for at least a couple of weeks by the time that I actually post the review, just because I like to not do a first impressions, but an actual in-depth review. I'm going to try and actually get better at talking about like the amount of versatility in a palette, the amount of looks you can create with it, how often I found myself going, oh, this would look better if I could just dip into this palette kind of things, just because I do feel like that is helpful information that I've kind of been leaving out. And I feel like that's also information you don't necessarily get at first glance. So yeah, I think that's about everything I have for y'all this week. I will hopefully see you next week as long as my energy levels stay good and I don't get behind on my work again. But with all that being said, I'm gonna let you go now. Bye bye.